Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. Here we are. We are back, and I'm back, I should say, to give you the lowdown of night one of the NFL draft. It's a really, really interesting draft. Probably a bit more happened than I think Stocks and I expected when we did the show last night. However, having said that, what I would say is that we got a lot of the selections right and a lot of the storylines correct. So I would say that if we have not gone, if you've not watched the draft yet and are looking for, if you don't want spoilers, then turn off now, wait till you've watched the draft. If not, then let's get straight into it and talk about this draft. And we start with Cam Ward. So Cam Ward is the first overall pick. I don't think there's any real surprise. I don't think there's any real shock that he is the first overall pick here. It's kind of what we projected to happen. And so, not much to break down. What are you getting there, Tennessee fans? And for fantasy, it's pretty straightforward. He's a quarterback that can scramble a little bit. He's got good passing ability. He can put the ball in the air. There is some developmental work that needs to happen. Rookie year could be a bit difficult, but there's no doubt there's probably a quarterback in there. For fantasy-wise, I don't think he is a guy I'd be actively targeting high in the Superflex draft. I think he's got an upside of maybe QB 15. It's kind of where I see his upside. He's in that sort of 15 to 20 range for me is where I think he could land. He might have a few QB1 performances throughout the seasons, but not a guy I think is going to challenge sort of the top 6, top 7 of the position and join that elite tier. Could be wrong, of course. This is projections. We don't know how these plays really, truly pan out and the mistakes be made, but that as it stands is kind of my general feeling on him. We're going to move to the next pick. So the next pick in the draft was definitely a blockbuster. The pick itself, not a surprise, but what proceeded to happen before that was, so the Jacksonville Jaguars moved up from 5 overall to 2 overall. It cost them a 2nd round pick this year, a 4th round pick swap this year, and their 2026 1st round pick. So it was a real steep price to pay. They did end up getting a 6th round pick back this year. So effectively, they've moved up 22 spots in the 4th round. They've picked up a 6th, and it's cost them to go up 3 spots, a 2nd, and next year's 1st to get Travis Hunter. Now, that's a big price tag. Now, Travis Hunter, probably one of the more elite players in this draft. They did announce him as wide receiver defensive back. So that does mean that they will expect him to play some defensive back snaps. Jags need a corner. I think they'll focus more on the offensive side. My initial reaction to this is I think he's probably going to be the wide receiver 2 behind Thomas, which means I don't think he's going to have that elite early ceiling that perhaps there might be for a few other receivers. And so I still think he's probably right up there as one of the best receivers in this class. But having said that, I think it'd be really interesting to see. I think he'll get the majority of snaps on offense. I think there will be plays for him, and giving the Jags a weapon, they needed another wide receiver. Does that offense sustain 2 top 12 wide receivers? Probably not. Even with Liam Cohen, and he could make that offense better. He should make it better. But I think we're looking at, for this year, Travis Hunter being maybe at best a wide receiver 2. And I think what you're doing is effectively they've told you that he is a wide receiver 2 because they've got their guy in Brian Thomas Jr. So I don't think he's going to be their alpha. And I think from a fantasy perspective, that is going to be really tough. In an IDP world, if you can get a cornerback that you can slot a cornerback that plays wide receiver, yeah, that would be really interesting to see his designation and how that's going to work. But I will say that I think it's perhaps slightly more underwhelming than if he went to the Browns, just because I think you've got Brian Thomas Jr. there, who I think has that elite capability. So I'm kind of not rushing to put Travis Hunter at the top of my wide receiver board this morning, having seen that trade. New York Giants took Abdul Carter. This was a pick I thought would happen, as I said on last night's show. I think it's a solid pick. I think it's an automatic pick. I think it makes complete sense for them, and I think it's a really good, solid selection to a team that really needs to continue to just put bodies on that defensive line. I don't think that offense is going to be good enough to carry games on their own, and they're going to need the defense to really build. And they built their 2 Super Bowl wins in this century off the back of the defense, and I think that's what they're looking to do here is go back to that style of football, and it suits them very well. So I really love that pick. Will Campbell at 4 to the Patriots. Again, this is no real shock here. Taking the best tackle on the board for a team that really needed an offensive tackle, protect Drake May. He got beat around a bit last year, but I think I really love this pick. It was one that was pretty predictable. It's not a big shock here, but I do think it's a really, really good pick. And I like the way that they've gone about and just hit the button, didn't trade down, took the best tackle on the board and set themselves up for success. So the Browns moved from 2 to 5. There was thoughts that they could trade back again. I think they probably fielded some calls. I don't know if they got what they wanted. But they took Mason Graham. And I kind of, at the time, it made a lot of sense. Now I'm starting to second guess this. I mean, he will stop the run. You've got Garrett on the edge. You've got Mason Graham on the other side. You've got 2 disruptors. They're in a division with some of the best offenses in football in the Ravens and the Bengals, and they're going to bring the heat from both sides. That said, when you sat there and you've got the board as the board is falling, is that really the Browns' desperate need of defensive tackle? And is Mason Graham the best player available that you can't not take him? My answer to that is no in both camps, because you've paid up for Myles Garrett. So you put Myles Garrett on this huge contract. You've made him untouchable. Great, you've got help the other side. I just think Mason Graham is a reach and not a pick that really solves the immediate problems of the Cleveland Browns. So good that you've got 36. You've got 2 picks in the first 4 tonight to address some of the offensive needs. And we'll get onto some ideas as to what could happen there. But yeah, I wouldn't give this a particularly high grade. I wouldn't say this is a pick that was desperately needed. So then last night, the Raiders fall to the 6th pick. Ashton Jeanty's on the board. Now, in my mock that we talked about last night, I had him going at 5 to the Jaguars. Stocks didn't, and Stocks had him going here, and Stocks is absolutely bang on here with Jeanty going to the Raiders. I thought the Raiders would be a bit more sensible. I mean, you can't deny the talent. You can't deny what he can do. And he will bring some real class and some real ability to that offense. But I still think they need offensive line help. They need wide receiver help. They need a lot of players. And I think they're a long way from being where they need to be. So I think for me, it's a really interesting one. I read some things last night about he's got, there's absolutely no one there. Well, I mean, Raheem Mostert's there. So I think if you took a flyer on Raheem Mostert this offseason, you might have sort of thrown some capital away. I still think Raheem Mostert might have some value here, but yeah, I think they're going to use Jeanty a lot. His fantasy stock will be solid. And be the Jeanty and Bauer show in in Las Vegas. But yeah, a bit surprised they went with it, but that's where we are here. We moved to the Jets, did a really sensible thing here and took Ahmad Membu. For me, second best tackle on the board, position of need. I like what Aaron Glenn's doing here. He kind of like didn't fall by the pressure of, oh, we need to take a skill position or we need to, go ahead and do X, Y, and Z. No, what he did was, I've got a quarterback who has struggled with protection over years. I need to get him as much protection as possible. I'm going to go and get the best tackle available on the board. And they did that. And I look at that Jets pick and think it's a really solid pick. I really like Membu. He's been in the SEC. He's battle hard and he's played against NFL-ready defensive linemen. He's good to go. You can plug him in day one and he's ready. So I like that pick for the Jets. This is where things started to go a little bit weird. The Carolina Panthers and Dave Canales took Tet McMillan at 8, and I have to say, for fantasy purposes, I absolutely hate this pick. There is absolutely everything. I kind of get it from the perspective of the Panthers of they don't have a weapon. He's a weapon. He's a big, big body guy. So they think they're getting the updated version of Mike Evans. And I think they've seen Mike Evans torment them for years. And Dave Canales had Mike Evans, of course, and thought, we're going to get this year's Mike Evans. For fantasy purposes, I just think with Bryce Young and that offense, are they going to get the ball enough to sustain it? Is he going to be ready enough to get going? He is a jump ball specialist, and he will help with those errant throws to a degree. But I just look at this for fantasy and think his ceiling is capped, as their quarterback is more a sort of work your way slowly down the field kind of quarterback. So I don't love this pick for fantasy purposes, and Tet McMillan will move down my board a little bit as a result of this landing spot. You love the capital, but he's gone to a team that hasn't produced a wide receiver one performance for several years, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. I would have liked Tet McMillan to go to a better team. It's where I would have liked this to have happened. But, the one thing you could argue is the volume will be there, but he hasn't got a 2 who's going to be that foil. Maybe they get him today and they go all out and rebuild. But, you've got, I think Adam Thielen's still the best receiver in town to play alongside Tet McMillan. So it's hard to be excited about this pick. A lot of people would have had Tet as sort of the wide receiver one here. And it's hard to get excited about it. It really is. I think it's a really difficult situation to get excited about if you are a Tet McMillan fan. But if you're a Panthers fan, you're going to be excited. You've got a playmaker. You've got someone that comes in. Right, let's talk about the Saints. A lot of talk. They take Shedeur Sanders. They did not take Shedeur Sanders. They took the third best tackle. In my view, probably the second best tackle in Kelvin Banks. I had him going above Membu. But, I think they're very, very close. For me, Kellen Moore has come from Philadelphia. He's building the line. I thought they might go edge and get defensive playmakers as they struggled there. But they went offensive line. It kind of makes sense. I don't really have any strong negative feelings or positive feelings. I think it's a sensible pick. It makes complete sense. And, what Kellen Moore wants to do there is strengthen that offensive line. And he wants to really lead with that offensive line and to bully teams. Then we get to the 10th pick with the Chicago Bears. Both Stocks and I went with Tyler Warren here last night. They did go tight end. They did not go Tyler Warren. They went Colston Loveland. Now, there must be something about Loveland that they love more. And Ben Johnson's a guy I can get behind. And really, I think we talked about this last night, this need to have an intermediate guy over the top who's going to really be able to provide some spark for Caleb Williams and give him a get out of jail free card. And I think he will do that 100%. I think the reason I would have had Tyler Warren here is I think he becomes an additional pass blocker. I have some question marks on Colston Loveland's pass blocking here. It's not quite as good as Warren's. I don't think he's quite the playmaker as Warren is. But Ben Johnson is someone who we see what he did with Sam Laporta, that he is someone who knows how to scheme a lot of 12 personnel. They'll use Cole Kmet. They'll use Colston Loveland. You can't bet against this. For fantasy, this is a good landing spot. Any tight end that went into this offense is a good landing spot. this move Loveland above Warren in the short term in a redraft. If I was drafting just for this year, 100%, because I trust Ben Johnson and I trust this Bears offense now to really find a way to get him involved early. Which when we get to Tyler Warren, I'll talk about the immediate challenges. But over the long term, I would expect Tyler Warren to probably have the better career. But that's kind of where we are. So it's the right position, but the wrong player. And those things do definitely happen. And I think it's interesting that they went with Loveland, and I want to dig in a little bit as to why. But my immediate thought on Loveland is he could easily be a tight end one this year. I think he could compete to be in the mid-range, like that tight end sort of 6 to 8 range this year, maybe even higher than that if the volume proceeds to be there. I think for me, I look at the immediate short term in redraft. I think Loveland is a tight end that becomes really fascinating. What does his price look like? Are people going to jump on it because it's a rookie and it's Ben Johnson? That could easily happen. I think there's a good chance he gets overhyped in redraft this year, but he's one I'll keep an eye on. I do think it's interesting. I would be willing to invest. Let's move to the 49ers. They took Michael Williams. I think Michael Williams for me is one of the best pass rushers in this draft. A little bit of injury news. Again, would you say it was the strongest position to need because you've got Nick Bosa? No, maybe this questions the long-term future of Nick Bosa. I don't really know. Like, I think it's a great player to fit in here, but I don't know if this is again strongest position of need. But maybe it is best player available here. I'm looking at Michael Williams on this board, thinking he probably, like I had him in the top 10. I think Stocks had him in the top 10. I think he's a top 10 player. Maybe you trade back and you get him. I don't know. He's a guy that will do a lot of things for you and will be a very, very good football player. Was it the strongest position of need? No. But, sometimes you just can't pass up talent. Then we get to the Cowboys. Lots of talk. Would they take McMillan? Would they get a skill offensive player? Would they go with a running back? Would they do lots of things? And then what they ended up doing was drafting another offensive lineman. They get their third Tyler on the offensive line, and they take Tyler Booker, a player who, for me, I absolutely did not have going in the first round. He is an apt. By the way, I must say, of all the entrances to the stage last night, Tyler Booker's was by far my favorite. He was so excited. He picked someone up that he just ran to where you get your hat, and he literally ran the whole way. He was so excited, and I love that enthusiasm. He picked the commish up. I think he's someone who can be really, really dominant. I think he's someone who can be a really, really good guard in the NFL, but he's going to need a bit of time to get there. I don't think he's a first-round player. I think the Cowboys should have tried to shop this one back and tried to move back. I'm sure there must have been some teams here calling or wanting to move up to get ahead of some other players. And I think maybe if there's not, then there's not, and you go and get your guy, right? But I didn't have him going in this range at all, and maybe would have preferred they'd done something a bit different. Dolphins go DT. Stocks called it with Kenneth Grant. I thought they would go in a different direction, but did think they'd go DT. This was one of their absolutely biggest needs here, the Dolphins. I don't think you can really kill the Dolphins for making this pick. Building the trenches, they really needed a run stuffer. They needed someone to come in and really make different plays here. And I like they're an easy team to run on, the Dolphins. So bringing in someone who's just going to absolutely stuff the line is going to be really, really important. But you can also get to the quarterback as well. He's got some pass rush ability. I think you can play him in a few different places. So yeah, I like Kenneth Grant. I think it's a good pick. Got no problem here, coming from Michigan, of course. And then we do get to Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren was taken by the Colts. And again, Stocks and I thought Colston Loveland would be the pick here. So the Titans that we thought were going round one went in round one at the picks that we thought they would go, but they just went in the different order. I actually love Tyler Warren overall, so I think you probably get the gist. I think he can do absolutely everything. I think he's going to help whoever is the starting quarterback. I would expect that to be Anthony Richardson. I think he levels them up immediately. That inconsistent quarterback play is probably what makes Tyler Warren a slightly more gambly pick year one. I also think that the receivers though are not quite as set to be like Pittman. They paid a load of money to, and he didn't really get off the ground last year. Pierce made some plays. They had a few guys that kind of can make plays. They didn't have a star, and I think that Tyler Warren could be a star. I love the landing spot. I think it could be a rocky year one as they're trying to work out what to do at quarterback. But I think in year two, when there's that solidity, I think it could really take off for Tyler Warren. So I love him more in the dynasty aspect and would take him over Loveland. But I think in the short term, I would probably take Loveland. If you need immediate projection and production at the position, Loveland might be where you want to go. If you want to go for higher upside long term, then definitely Tyler Warren. And then we get the Atlanta Falcons. So the Atlanta Falcons are coming into this. I thought they've really strengthened at DB. They didn't. They went linebacker, edge, and they've got Jalen Walker, who's a great player. I think it's a good pick. I think they're going to play him at edge because I don't really have them. But the good thing about Walker is he can play inside and play Mike. So it is a really good play for them to see what they do here. Do they play him on the edge? Do they play him inside? You've got that versatility. I think they're going to have to nail him to a position and do that and see what they do. And again, there's some talks about, we'll get to later on in this video where, stronger opinions. I'm trying to be a bit careful here because I'm trying to do this in order. But I think for me, it's interesting to see about Jalen Walker and what they do long term. But solid pick. Didn't think there was a big problem here with this one. It kind of made a lot of sense to me. And then you got the Arizona Cardinals. I thought they'd go Matthew Golden here. They didn't. They decided to pass on wide receiver, and they went with Walter Nolan. Again, building up the defensive line, stop the run, get some real big guy with some big explosiveness in here. Hard to kill the sensible choice here because it's a good solution. And Gannon will definitely know what to do with him, and they'll know what to do with making that defensive line a little bit meaner because it's something that needs to happen. But I think it's a shame they didn't go for that showstopper piece on offense, but that's where we are. The Bengals went with Sherman Stewart, who again I mocked last night as well. I thought would happen. They really needed an edge. He was the best edge here. I thought this would be pretty much a home run pick, and it is. And he's going to step in really nicely to play opposite Trey Hendrickson. Makes a lot of sense because I think it's going to take a bit of time. I don't know how long Trey Hendrickson's going to be in Cincy, but you've got a guy here not just for the future, but he's going to step in day one and do something. They again are playing against a really strong defense or offensive division. So again, getting some defensive pieces to hurt quarterbacks is going to be the way forward. The Seahawks, there was a lot of talks they'd trade this pick even on draft night, that they would move down. But they didn't, where again, they didn't get a suitor or a price they wanted. They ended up taking Gray Zabel, another player that both Stocks and I mocked last night and got spot on. This guy can actually play 5 positions across the offensive line, so he's highly versatile. I actually think he'll probably start at guard, but maybe move to tackle. Small school, but I think in the end, you've got a player who's got a lot of traits here. We talked about him last night. I think he's going to be a really interesting prospect, and I look forward to seeing what he does at Seattle, but definitely a solid choice. And then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I went on last night and talked about the Buccaneers absolutely will not take a wide receiver. I said it in our Patreon chat. There's absolutely no chance the Buccaneers will take a wide receiver. Why would they? They've already got 3, and they made me look really stupid. And they've taken Emeka Egbuka. And it's taken me a long time to really think about what to say in this situation. And I think I'm going to say this. I think Jalen McMillan's dynasty stock just died. There's no other outcome here. I think they're looking at Egbuka as that third option. And I think the Buccaneers were probably forced into this decision. They played 4 games without Evans and Godwin. And McMillan was okay, and he had a good end of season stretch, but he didn't win football games. And I think they're thinking, well, Chris Godwin is a player who gets injured. Mike Evans is coming to the end of his career at some point in the near future. We probably need to think about what's next. And they must have decided that Egbuka was this guy over Matthew Golden, over Luther Burden. They take him as the second wide receiver, a team that now easily has the most loaded wide receiver room in the NFL, that you've got a Jalen McMillan sitting there as your wide receiver 4 and probably going to get rotational snaps at best. It's very, very interesting that they made this play. They had strong needs at Mike linebacker. Campbell was here. I thought that would be the pick. They need defensive backs. They haven't got a corner. Will Johnson was on the board at this point. They didn't take him. In fact, all the corners, with the exception of Travis Hunter, were still on the board. So you had your choice at corner. In fact, no defensive back at this point, other than Travis Hunter playing a bit, was taken. So you had the entire realm of the entire defensive back class to pick from at 19. You had Mike linebackers to choose from. You had edges to choose from. These are all positions that we all thought the Buccaneers would go for, given their struggles, but they went wide receiver. There's some logic to it. I think it's a reach. But I think really where we are now is that they obviously didn't like what they got out of Jalen McMillan. And everyone at the end of the season was like, well, Jalen McMillan's a dynasty buy. He's going to move up. He's going to be, if you bought into that narrative, his stock is zero. There is no hope for Jalen McMillan in this offense for the rest of his contract unless Chris Godwin or Mike Evans leaves. Because the Buccaneers have just told you that he's not worth much. So they will discard McMillan, I think. He'll get plays, but effectively his time in this NFL with the Buccaneers is, dare I say, almost over. Because I really think that stock is gone, and I think he'll play that third wide receiver role. I think he'll be that deep threat. And I think he will potentially be that succession piece to Mike Evans. Is maybe where the franchise is looking at Egbuka. We both thought that the Broncos would go running back here, and they didn't. They took the top-rated corner on the board, J.D. Barrett. He wasn't mine. Will Johnson was mine. But now, really interesting to bring in a corner when you've got Pat Surtain. Would you have said corner was a strong need for the Broncos? No. Would you say that this was a position that makes them instantly better? No. I think they had pretty good coverage, but effectively what you've brought in is a nickel corner who can play some slot, who is going to come in and just absolutely just shut down any aerial attack. I think he's a great corner. He's going to have a really, really solid career. And putting him on this team, that team is going to be very difficult to pass on deep. So it's a good pick. Position of need, no. Does it make them instantly better and turns it into wins? No, but I do think that they do get a bit better on defense in the sense of being able to stop the pass, but I think they were already pretty much elite there anyway. Makes the Broncos DST a little bit more exciting, I suppose, if you're picking them up. So then we get to 21, and we're thinking, is this the time for Shedeur Sanders? Is Shedeur Sanders going to come off the board here? I predicted it would be last night based on the fact that I just couldn't see a pathway to what the Steelers wanted to do. They opted against. They went with Stocks' pick. Stocks absolutely nailed it here in Derek Harmon. Now, my initial thought, and I'll save the Shedeur Sanders, is there either is something in the background where they are closer to Aaron Rodgers than perhaps they're letting on, or there is a plan. Because I think to just let Shedeur Sanders go here says to me there has to be a plan. If there's no plan, then this is wild. But we will see what happens. I guess it will all unfold and we'll know more in the next 24, 48 hours based on what the Steelers do. They have brought in a disruptive defensive tackle. He'll play alongside Cam Hayward, who is getting older. Stock said last night the comp was great. He called this selection as a position of need. He did a great job with it, and he absolutely smashed it. So, it's a position of need that gets filled. I like it. It makes me think there has to be something that we don't know about what's going on at quarterback, and there must be further down the line somewhere, and no one is in the know. We get to the Chargers at 22, and they select Amarian Hampton. He is, remember, my running back 1 in this class over Gene T, and it's going to be hard to move him from that with this landing spot. Yes, he pairs with Najee Harris. Not too worried about Najee Harris when it comes to Hampton. I think Hampton will improve. He'll get better. Year 1, you give it the Gene T. Year 2 onwards, Hampton could really get rolling in this hardball offense. This is a fascinating pick. I think Hampton could really go to the moon. I'm not worried about the long term of Najee Harris. It might just be disruptive in redraft. I'll be a bit more conservative on Hampton, but in Dynasty, I'll be very aggressive. And if there's opportunities to go up and get him, I'm going to try and get him. I think there's really, you're looking at this round 1 of a rookie draft, and you're saying there's maybe 4 guys worth going to get, and then the rest are a bit meh. And I would say Marion Hampton is right up there in the first round to go and push for. A guy who probably has risen into that conversation is Matthew Golden. The Packers picked their first wide receiver in the first round since 2002. They waited until the draft came to Green Bay, and they pretty much broke the internet with this pick. Look, I had him as a solid wide receiver here. I had him lower than other prospects. For most, he was the sort of wide receiver 2 on boards, and that was kind of where I mocked him. I actually have a second round grade on him. I think there's some things he needs to work on. My worry with him is it's a very crowded room. And I think Stocks had Egbuka going here, and I was just like, and the same argument applies. You've got Jaden Reed, you've got Dobbs, you've got Watson. I don't see this immediate pathway to volume for Golden. He's going to have to go out there and earn it. Year 1 could be challenging, but we'll see what happens. Admittedly, could he be better than all the players on the roster at wide receiver? Absolutely. But is he going to get there? I think he's going to need some help. So I think I look at the immediate, and again, I look at 2 hats. The redraft prospects is, I don't think he's a player you need to rush to go and get in a redraft. In the Dynasty, he definitely goes into that top 6 discussion because of draft capital and where they value him. And can he get to the ceiling? We'll have to wait and see. My bet is no. I think there's a good player. I think there's a solid wide receiver 2 figure in here, but I'm not clamoring out to trade the farm to go up and get him despite this landing spot. In fact, I think the landing spot could hold him back a little bit as well. So then we have the Vikings. I had the Vikings trading out of this pick. They didn't. Instead, what they did is they took Donovan Jackson and they brought in a guard. They're trying to just bring in offensive line guys. They must have liked him enough to do this and make this decision. I mean, he'll help Aaron Jones. They'll run the ball better with him in there. Donovan Jackson. Hate to kill a pick in the on the trenches because I think it's solid, but I don't think it's what many people would have expected or many people would have liked to have seen, but it is what it is. We moved to 25. It would have been the Texans picking, but then the Giants traded up, and I had this at 24. It went at 25. Even when I saw 25 come up, and Stocks will tell you because I texted him, I knew it was going to be Jackson Dart and not Shedeur Sanders. I think it's a better fit. I think it's a better pick. Now, let's get into Jackson Dart and why this pick was. Well, first of all, let's go with the comp. So the compensation was the Giants give up their second this year, which is effectively what they're picking now, so irrelevant. They give up a third this year and a third next year. That's effectively what they've given up to make this pick. Now, I like it that it's not the only pick that they made in this round. They picked up Abdul Carter, so I like it from that perspective. I like the fact that for effectively a third this year and a third next year, you've got that sort of, he's your guy. I don't rate him particularly highly, but I'm going to be objective here. If he is your guy, and you've made that talent evaluation, then I like it. I like the fact that you've gone and got your guy. You haven't overpaid. You haven't really leveraged too much out of the draft. You know, it's cost you a third this year and a third next year to get your quarterback for the future. I don't necessarily have a problem with this. And what I really like is he's gone to a landing spot. If you heard me on the College Days podcast, I talked about Jackson Dart needs to go somewhere where he can go and sit. And so they need to withdraw the pressures of him being a first-round pick, and you will need to have Jackson Dart sit behind Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, learn, absorb, get the best out of him, and really, I don't want to see Jackson Dart throw a ball this year. I think you just let him, maybe week 18, if there's nothing on the line, see what he's got, give him a bit of time, fine. But I don't think you want to see Jackson Dart this year. I think you want to let him sit, absorb. He needs a lot of work. He really is a project, but he's a project with the right investment could come well. And I think that the Giants are going to give him the best foundation for him to be the best success. And that's probably the nicest I can be on it, in the sense of there's a strategy. I admire the strategy. I don't think the cost is too much. I look at all of those pieces in its own independent parts and think there's a lot of thought that makes a lot of sense here. I don't think Jackson Dart is good enough to be a starting quarterback in the NFL right now. Can he get there? We'll have to see. But the Giants are telling you that. The Giants have told you that they don't see him playing this year by taking those two quarterbacks they signed in free agency. So I like this move in that sense, but I think there's work to be done. Obviously now they're not picking until round 4. We'll have to see what they do. They still need a few other picks, but they haven't leveraged too much of the farm to make this one happen. What does Jackson Dart sit? From a redraft perspective, it's irrelevant. From a dynasty perspective, he holds minor interest. I think he's someone that you're going to punt in a super flex at the end of round 1. If people want to jump up and take him, then let them. But I think he's one of these with the widest range of outcomes. He could be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, or he could flame out very quickly. And I liken him to sort of a Jameis Winston, maybe even a Will Levis. There'll be some elite performances in there, but there's going to be a lot of awful performances in there as well. So that happens, and then there's another trade immediately, and the Atlanta Falcons decide to trade up with the LA Rams and pick James Pierce Jr. As an edge from Tennessee. So what does that mean for Walker? Does Walker move to Mike? They've drafted effectively 2 edges. Very weird. That tells you Walker might go inside, which is fine. Raheem Morris is building a defense, right? They got overblown on offense. They threw games away. It's interesting. Do I think it was probably necessary to trade up? No. And they've given up, I believe they've given up a pick next year to do this. I think they gave up a 1 next year to do this. I mean, I don't even have him as the best edge left in the draft, so I think this is madness. But then I've stopped trying to reason what the Atlanta Falcons are doing after what they've done in the last 2 years. They obviously just have a very different way of thinking and working. That might work for them, that might not. But to trade up your 1 next year to go and get a guy you probably could have got at the back end or in the second round is interesting. Maybe they didn't think they could. Didn't want to take the risk. I don't know. Excuse me, but I think it's a very strange pick. This is probably, for me, arguably the worst pick of the night. Given the capital and the investment, I assuming that Pierce is going to be the edge and Walker's going inside. If they're going to play them both, and I really am lost for words here. I kind of need to see what happens here, but very, very strange. When you've already taken a guy who can play edge to trade up and get an edge is bizarre. But they must have a plan. We would assume they have a plan. We'll have to wait and see. Pick 27, we said ride it in. Malachi Starks will be a Baltimore Raven. And you know what? He is. He said if there was one pick in the whole draft that we could absolutely nail the master other than Cam Ward, it was this pick. And we are absolutely right. That is who is there. It's just absolutely like the perfect pick. And I'm absolutely gutted that it's happened because I can't believe that no one has gone ahead and stopped it from happening. The Detroit Lions have gone Tyreek Williams. So you've got, again, a run stopper. Ravens, the Lions need to get a little bit better there. They had a lot of injuries last year, so it's hard to judge where they are. But again, they get really nasty on this defensive line to go with McNeil and Hutchinson. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do with him and where they line him up. Is it a 3 technique or a 5 technique? But I mean, I think he can do both, and he'll be a phenomenal asset to this team. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting, and I like the pick. And then the Washington Commanders go here, and they take Josh Connolly. I had him going a couple of picks later, but yeah, love this, that he was probably one of the top tackles here remaining. And we had 2 guys that kind of neck and neck here. Josh Connolly goes to the Commanders, and again, what you're doing is you're building a team that is going to just protect and look after Jaden Daniels. And what you've done here is you've got him to play the other side of Laramie Tunsil. So that offensive line has got a lot better overnight and this offseason. So, yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. And Washington are giving Jaden Daniels all the tools that he needs to be highly successful in this league. The Bills, I thought that they would go with... I thought they'd take safety here. They didn't. They went cornerback, which makes sense. They went Maxwell Hairston, a player I don't think is worthy of a first-round pick, but there you go. I think he's someone who, he's quick. He plays long. He's got a lot of versatility there, but he's going to need to learn. He's going to need to learn quickly. You're going to put him with Tre'Davious White. We'll take him under his wing. I think that makes some sense. But yeah, I think for me, he's a player that probably needs to do a bit more sort of learning and developing. But yeah, obviously a big position of need for the Bills. They got absolutely carved in the air. I think they were bottom 6, bottom 7 in terms of defense. So they need to improve, and they're looking to do that. Then the Eagles trade. The Eagles move up 1 pick here. So they go and they give a 5th round pick to move up 1. And they take Gio Campbell, who I thought would go to the Buccaneers. I cannot believe he was still on the board at 31. But this is an absolute slam dunk pick. It's a phenomenal pick. And I know that they've rebought in Zach Bourne, but actually being able to bring Campbell in now is going to absolutely dominate that interior middle linebacker role. And I think he's a phenomenal player who is a game changer. The fact that he was still there is mind-boggling. The fact that the Eagles, I think, apparently were trying to go all the way up to 22 to go and get him. And they ended up paying a 5th round pick to get him. I mean, it makes complete sense. He's a phenomenal player. I think for me, top 15 in this draft. So to get him at 31 is a great pick. Perfect pick from the Eagles for me. And then the Chiefs move down 1, but they do pick and they take Josh Simmons, who was a player I had mocking to them. I think Stocks did as well. Recovering from patella tendon injury. I think he tore that, so nasty injury. But they needed a tackle after Tooney went, as we sort of said last night. Stocks made a really good point. So they take tackle. Thought there could be a trade for Sanders, didn't happen. And that's where we are. For me, the big omissions from round 1 would be Shedeur Sanders, although I 100% think it's the right decision. I don't think he is a first round talent, and therefore I 100% agree with him not being taken last night. I feel Will Johnson could have gone last night. There are obviously injury concerns with him. I think there's a few other players here. Nick Scorton at edge, I think, was a player who could have appeared here for sure. There's Nick Emmanuel at safety. No safeties have gone off the board. Donovan Ezenaku is another one here. So we're going to turn our attentions to today. And some of the players we're going to look out for in the first 20 picks. Shedeur Sanders is going to be one. Do Cleveland, with a first-round pick next year, giving them 2, do they punch the ticket on Shedeur Sanders as a temporary option here? Do they wait? What are they going to do? Are they going to trade? I don't think they're going to take... I mean, I said to them they could take Jalen Milroe here, and that's something that could be something that happens. And Shedeur falls even further. That will be really interesting to see what happens there. They have the Cleveland Browns 2 of the first 4 picks here. So you could expect them to maybe go quarterback, running back. Henderson could come off the board early as well. So that will be an interesting situation to look at. Sorry, I was just trying to pull up the picks from tonight. So obviously, Shedeur Sanders is going to be the interesting one. He could go really early here. The Texans will pick next. I expect them to go offensive line. They need offensive line help. There's some offensive line players they could take here. They could go tackle. They could go guard. We'll see what happens. I'd expect that to happen. I fully expect Luther Burden to probably go to the Tennessee Titans and pair Cam Ward with a new weapon. And I expect them to take Luther Burden. I think this pick makes too much sense. If they get the opportunity to make it, that's what I would expect them to do. And then we can start mocking and looking at what they do here. And then the Browns, I think they go running back here at 36, so 2 picks in the top 4 tonight if they don't trade down of any of these. I think Henderson could go fairly early tonight. I think New Orleans could be really interesting because I think they could do something really radical and take Tyler Shook at 40, which would be madness. Madness is the only word I've got if they do that. But keep an eye on Nick Emmanwori. He could go to the Jets if he makes it that far. I think Judkins is someone that you could look at as someone going to the Cowboys. That's definitely a pick I would look at. And then I think you'll see a lot of defensive players. I think you'll see get a couple of other wide receivers go here, but I'd fully expect this to be a heavily defensive round. And I think you'll probably see a couple of running backs, but I don't think you're going to see too many. Maybe at the back end of round 2, you might see a couple more running backs go. But it's going to be really, really interesting. But the big names tonight, Shedeur Sanders, Henderson, Judkins, Luther Burden, Tyler Shook as a player, Jalen Milroe. These are players that I'd be expecting to go in round 2, and we'll see what the chaos brings. So it's going to be a really, really exciting night. I hope you've enjoyed round 1. I hope you enjoyed the wrap up. I hope you enjoyed the show last night because I think it's hard to predict these. Stocks and I got 10 picks correct each, and then a few where we hit the crossbar, right player, wrong position, kind of, or right position, wrong player kind of thing. But between us, I think we got over half the draft spot on, which is, no mean feat. So I think, you've been well informed with our process. And then next week, we'll bring in an amazing guest to start breaking this down for fantasy football. So definitely don't miss out for that. But yeah, enjoy the draft this weekend. It's going to be very exciting. It definitely held some stories and some drama last night, despite the fact thinking it's just going to be chalky. And it was fairly chalky as well. But we definitely got that interest and intrigue there. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you all get through this really tired and sleepy Friday. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.